So thank you so much for being here, Kristin.
You're welcome.
Thanks for joining this process, this project. And first off, I think it'd be great if we just introduce ourselves. You could say your name, if you like your preferred pronouns, and what your title is, what you do for the college.
Yeah. So my name is Kristin Brennan. I use she, her pronouns, and I am the executive director of career exploration and development, which means I have the great privilege of being in conversations with lots of people about their lives and their futures and their hopes. And our team helps people build skills toward getting what they are ultimately aiming for. So
thank you. And I am Roland Mendiola. I use he, him, his pronouns. I serve as a clinical psychologist and the interim director for Counseling and Wellness Service. And just to provide a very brief piece of context about why this project, why interviews of different Bowdoin personnel. Basically, it comes down to one, the intention of hearing voices across the college on a more personal level that students and maybe staff and faculty might not hear typically. And two, to explore this intersection between mental health, stigma, culture, and identity, and particularly in light of the context or the times we're living in today.
Yeah.
So thanks again for doing this. And before we get started with questions too, I just want to put it out there. In line with those intentions, there's really no right or wrong way to answer these questions. I really encourage you, whatever you feel comfortable sharing will be just perfect.
Great.
Thanks. First off, Kristin, did you grow up talking about mental or emotional health? And if so, how? And if not, why not, do you think?
Yeah, I thought these questions are, you're asking folks are so interesting. And I don't think mental health was a terminology that I remember. Like part of it's just time. Like I don't think it was a phrase that was in sort of circulation in the same way. And I think that, I definitely had a lot of love and support as a kid. And I was a pretty sensitive kid always, like to my own emotions and other people's emotions. So I felt a lot of things. And I feel like there was a lot of support always you could be angry, you could be sad. But I don't think mental health was even a term. And I think to the extent that there were words that were associated with mental health, they weren't positive ones. So somebody could be depressed or someone could be like, some kind of negative version of that. But I think the sense was like you didn't invoke something like the term mental health unless something really bad was going on. You think about it as health, like you think regular health, like you could go, something you could build and work on, like go for a run, eat healthy foods. I don't think mental health was invoked in the same way.
Yeah. Unless like you're saying there was something wrong, there's a big problem going on.
Yeah.
And what I find when I ask this kind of question or, this topic comes up with students pretty naturally as well, it's more or less the question kind of, as you're saying, more or less like, did you talk about emotions or did you, how is it talking about feelings, or was it okay to express feelings? Was it okay to feel feelings? And a lot of those.
Yeah, I think so. But
it's okay for you when you're growing up.
Yeah, I think so. But I don't think there was this idea of mental health as like a muscle you could work or like a neutral term that exists in everybody in a given state on a given day,
So it sounds like emotions were pretty well accepted and encouraged the way you grew up.
I think so, yeah.
And what was the sort of takeaway from your childhood, I guess you could say, when it comes to like emotional life, one's emotion?
Yeah, I mean, I will say, I guess the one other thing I would say is that one of the takeaways was that it's transient. Like feelings are just a thing that happens now or then, and then it's a different feeling, I guess, the next week. I think the ultimate, like one of the lessons in my family was definitely sort of resilience. So my dad's side is immigrants from Ireland who came over and did construction and skilled labor work. And my mom's side is, my grandmother coming from North Dakota, wearing itchy, scratchy stockings during the Depression growing up.
Mm-hmm.
My grandfather coming across the country to California in the Dust Bowl migration from Arkansas. So I think in general, sort of the point of view was resilience. Like, certainly things have been worse, at some other point, or this will pass. So I think that's a good lesson. I also think when we get to the, how is this shifted? I also think that at some point, I'm going to have to pause this for a second because my phone is making noise.
Oh, it's okay. Take your time.
I forgot to turn it off.
Like we said, real life is happening.
Real life. Yeah, but I'll turn off this version of real life. I was going to say the thing that you learn though at some point is that as resilient as you may be, at some point something is going to knock you sideways. Mm-hmm. If you live long enough, and some people this happens to them in the first 10 years of their life, and sometimes it happens to you at 40, but if you stick around long enough, something is going to knock you off your center, no matter how strong that center is. And I think that is something that, didn't necessarily grow up prepared for.
Got you. That wasn't necessarily talked about. There was a strong sense of we will get through this.
Yeah, you'll get through it, but there wasn't kind of
when you don't,
yeah, or you might getting through it might take a year or two. I'm not sure that was, acknowledged or talked about. Yeah.
So what has shifted for you? How would you describe your relationship to mental, emotional health and wellness now?
Yeah. Well, I think one big shift, I was thinking about this, was I had a good friend from college then, and we were now post-college in our 20s, living in the same city, having brunch, hanging out. And we would have these wonderful, profound conversations. And, I've always, I think many people, friends are a form of therapy, right? You have all these people you collect if you're lucky. And I've been lucky to connect with people who get you, and you have great conversations, and that's its own kind of therapeutic, value. But I remember my totally balanced, totally centered, funny, sensitive, lovely friend would start talking about this wonderful advice she was getting. And I was like, this is great advice. This is great secondhand used advice. This applies to me. You're working through these things. Who is this person? Yeah. I was a therapist, and I was thinking to myself, oh, it was my first sort of revelation that you didn't actually have to have been in one of those profoundly knocked off center moments. You could just be living your life and actually discover that it could be useful to talk to someone and sort through on your own, or even just with your friends. Yes. And so that was a useful life lesson in you don't actually have to be in one of these you don't have to have experienced a death in the family. You don't have to have been through a massively disruptive episode. You could just be living your life and get a lot of value out of figuring out yourself and how you respond to things in life. And so I thought that was a pretty big turning point.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I mean, it's still the case today. I think there's a certain orientation we have of I need to have a problem, or it's sort of not worth, and it has to be of some significance, a significant problem. And that it's not enough to just want to work on ourselves or figure ourselves out more, and try to understand things in a deeper way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And so that also that contributed to your shift, it sounds like.
Yeah, absolutely. And then the good news is then when that thing comes along that knocks you sideways, you have tools and resources and ways of understanding yourself. I think also I was always pretty good at understanding myself, again, back to the introspection sensitive person, but knowing what to do with all of that, having things you can actually do to become a sort of more balanced, more understanding, more empathetic person, to yourself as well as to other people.
Yeah.
That's been a great learning.
So it sounds like friends have been instrumental in that. What are your typical tools, would you say, Kristin?
Oh, what are my typical tools?
Whether or not, how often regular we're using them these days, but
Yeah, well, I think one of the most profound tools actually has been learning to use the same tools for yourself that you use for your friends. And so I give this advice actually quite a bit now, when people are in like a tough spot. And some, I have to acknowledge that the work I do in terms of career stuff. So I'm talking with people who are seeking something, who are putting themselves out there, trying to put out their best shiny, sparkly version of themselves to like get an opportunity. That is exhausting. It's exhausting under normal circumstances, but it's super exhausting when you're also carrying the weight of the world that we're all carrying. And so, people are hard on themselves. And as someone who is historically hard on myself, I relate. And so I think that one of the big tools I have learned, and I wish I'd discovered this woman named Kristin Neff earlier, who talks about compassion for yourself, and has actual tools and all this good stuff. But gosh, I don't know if it's Kristin Neff's video, but I watched a video a few years ago. It's so sad. It might bring tears in my eyes just remembering it, because they have two young women talking to each other, and they make them say to their friend the horrible things they say to themselves. I don't know if you've seen this video. It's very powerful. So they have these women say like the horriblest thing they think about themselves, they make them say it to their friend. And you can see like the revelation, like, why would you do that to someone you care about, right? But we do that to ourselves all the time. And so I think for me that actually friendship has been like a really good sort of revelatory moment, because you're like, yes, if you're being a friend to yourself, if you care about you, why would you?
You wouldn't dream of it.
Right, these awful things that you're saying,
the kind of treatment, the kind of language we use with ourselves.
Yeah. So that's one tool, and it's amazing how that perspective changed. Like, would you say that to a good friend? No, like, of course I wouldn't. Yeah.
That's great. And yeah, she's a wonderful resource, Kristin. Anything you would say, Kristin, about who you are, where you come from, shapes your perception, your attitudes about mental, emotional well-being? Yeah.
I mean, I think, the family background we talked a little bit about. I bet that's not uncommon. That you grew up with, sort of like, in my case, like I said, like a lot of love and support, but, also a sense that you move through it, right? And I think ultimately that is good. You got to move through it. I know one of the things that gets me through like tough times, and boy, for everyone in the last while, good work that I care about, like producing good things, like helping other people, like keeps you going. So I think there's something about the value of being engaged in work you care about with people. It's a good thing. I like don't want to lose that with the bathwater in any way. But I think the other things I would say, I guess, about me that might have shaped this in a positive way, like an orientation to learning and empathy. And so I think once I got the hang of the idea that you didn't have to be having a massive life crisis to figure yourself out and have some tools, like it became fun to learn the tools. So, and to get more of an insight into how I work and how other people work. And so that's been really motivating, because again, I'm not a therapist, I don't do therapy in my office, but I do draw on things that I have just learned about how people process emotion and hopes. And, when the hopes go sideways, like that all comes up somehow or another. And it makes, just learning to be a really good listener is a big part of it. And then the empathy part. Yeah, I feel like the good news is that when you experience crummy things and have to process through them yourself, it makes you a whole lot better at being helpful to other people experiencing crummy things.
Yeah, exactly. It sounds like you've maybe both cultivated and naturally had just a very curious and sounds like humble attitude about wanting to understand yourself, understand people. And that's been really, sounds like really useful for this. And also I'm just curious, like you're saying, when you're going through maybe specifically crummy things, or when life hits you sideways, like what do you find yourself? What would you say, if you want to, about that experience for you and how you've overcome those times?
Yeah. I mean, it's some interesting you said humble, because I think it does take some humility. And I think
I agree.
the thing that I have learned through like reading and life experiences, like someone once told me, like when high achievers hit the wall, it's actually the hardest thing of all, because to have been high achieving in your life and, gotten various, milestones accomplished and whatever, you get sort of a false sense of control over the world. Like, oh, see, if you really work hard and you set the goal, then inevitably, and so I think that's true, that like you have to, this cultivating a sense of compassion for yourself, or forgiveness for not being able to be in control of everything. So
Yeah.
I don't know if I've always had humility about that. I feel like humility smacks you each time you encounter one of these. You're like, right, in the early days
Learn
of
it
the
the hard way.
pandemic.
Yeah.
Yeah, totally. And you keep relearning it too. So
Right.
I remember in the early days of the pandemic, I kept trying to re-plan things. I'd be, okay, can't visit my dad in Florida right now, and I'd really like to do that. So I'll just plan it for another time. No, that's not going to work. No, we can't run this program the way. So we'll do it. Yeah. And then some of it works, right? Some of it is that productive, resilient, like, but my husband at one point was like, would you quit trying to win the pandemic?
Get
You
one over
can't,
the pandemic.
you can't win the pandemic. Like, it's not, I was like, all right,
Do
I'm
you know
trying
the
to win
pandemic board
again.
game? Do you know the board game Pandemic?
No, I've never played the board game Pandemic.
You can sometimes win the pandemic.
That's good to know. I'll tell him.
It's really hard.
Yeah. But he's like, I think you're trying to win again. I was like, dang it, I'm trying to win again.
Kristin, I'd love you to maybe speak to some of the nuance of such an important thing you're talking. If you're talking to the high achievers out there right now, which they are plentiful, I think.
Yeah. All of us guilty. Yeah.
Just some of the nuance of this, because obviously, I think myself included, I think it's maybe implied in what you're saying. I don't think any of us are anti-achievement. Like there's something I think quite brilliant and beautiful about achieving and aspiring to excellence. And I think we're saying more than just that too.
Mm-hmm.
So would you speak to some of the nuance of that, of like how to do that well, I think is maybe the question.
Yeah. I mean, I think part of it is the figuring out over and over again sometimes that you don't have to front, like be someone else. And again, this is like, we're all still learning this stuff. I'm not making you as an expert on this forever.
Right.
But as a funny example, so I remember when I first started managing people, I read this book on managing people. This is a while ago, so I'm not inflicting this on my current team. And it was about the proper amount of distance. I'm not kidding you. It was a very old management book to have between you and the people that you were accountable for. And I was like, okay, I guess good. And like each subsequent job I've had and subsequent team I've had, and then I have to keep learning it over and over again. There is always this pressure to like have it together and know the answers, and you just have to keep learning that again and again, and throughout the book on the proper amount of distance, because especially right now, we're all just human beings doing our best in an imperfect situation.
Yeah.
So I think that's what I'm always trying to figure out, and probably will work on for the rest of my life, is the combination of like truly like achievement and leadership and figuring out things that are hard and keeping going. Because that is also a source for me of mental health, is like to be doing and moving things and like making things better, but also to like when you face plant or you don't know what to do, to realize it doesn't make you a whole different person or a less capable person. It just makes you a person.
Yeah. Yeah. It makes me think of that, the famous, infamous joke in AA, which is, what's the most surefire way to make God laugh? You tell God your plans.
Yeah.
What I'm hearing though, it feels like, yes, this very sometimes hard fought lesson of coming back to, it feels like, I think our genuine desire to learn, like even when things are hard, that I think all of us are here because we love learning at some very basic level.
Yeah.
And that we forget that, like, and that learning is hard actually, and that it's humbling and it's messy and not straightforward.
Yeah. And
But
failure
like,
actually is the best teacher, but it just doesn't feel great
yes,
when it's happening.
yeah,
And so like recharacterizing it as learning is very helpful.
yeah. And would you say, I guess it's making me think like we end up focusing too much on maybe the achievement part and less on the learning part or something like that. That's what comes to my mind. I don't know. What would you say?
Yeah, I think so. And I think having people to learn with, I mean, that's still always true. Like I really do
Yeah,
value
yeah,
people in my life who are, there and will listen, will also
right,
tell you where you're off the rails.
right.
Um,
Learning together. Yeah,
just be with you. Yeah, I think that, that's
yeah,
another really important ingredient.
totally agree. Um, some of these conversations, some of the intention is also around spotlighting, in this case, mental health, what I think a lot of us in the field would consider a pervasive elephant in the room, even though it's, I think more widely talked about now, but there's a lot of elements that still go unspoken. Any kinds of elephants in the room that you feel like are particularly salient for you and your work, or just in life in general, in the world we're in today?
Yeah, I mean, I think that, successively in waves, spotlights get shown on some of the elephants in the room, and then unfortunately the spotlights disappear. And right now we have a spotlight on racism, sexism, so many isms. It's just the beginning.
Yeah.
And I mean, I think the other thing, it's so funny, but we have been living with the pandemic long enough that it's almost background noise sometimes.
Right.
It's background noise when you are in the middle of a health crisis in your immediate family, or fearing for that, of course, but it's just been droning on for so long that you almost forget that we are dealing with so many unprecedented things at the same time.
Yeah.
I asked my grandmother, who's 95, a couple months ago, what is the other time that you've been through that's most like this? Was it depression?
Yeah.
And she said, never.
Mm.
Like there's never been
Yeah.
anything like this.
Yeah.
And so
What was that for you?
what was that?
How was that for you, getting that?
Well, it was kind of reassuring in a way.
Mm.
I mean, I guess in a strange way.
Yeah. I hear you.
I think
that it's not unwarranted, like the reactions.
Yeah, that the amount of what we're carrying is so much. And so, yeah, I mean, I wish for, I, I was going to say, I wish for her sake, for instance, we talk about this all the time. Like she lost her water aerobics class, which it was not like she loves her water aerobics class. It's back. But just these small things that you count on as part of your routine and your friendships and your,
That's right. Yeah.
That is the least of the many things lost. But it's just, these things that bring you joy are missing, and your normal coping mechanisms. I'll just go to yoga class. Well, I mean, it depends on how you feel about indoor and outdoor yoga, and like just these things that you usually like. I'll go visit a friend. It always makes me feel good to visit my friend in place X. And you're like, well, not only is place X like not a place I feel like I could safely come off a plane and be with her children who have immunocompromises, but also it's on fire. So like I have never been worried for this many people in this many locations at the same time in my life. Different kinds of crises affecting all of them. Like we're all carrying so much. And so I think that's the other elephant in the room, is just carrying. You never know. I forget what the phrase is, but you like never know what's going on with someone, what all they're carrying. Like now you assume they're carrying a lot. Like they're carrying a lot.
Yeah. Maybe it's a unfair question at this point in the game, but how are you? What do you do with that? Like the amount of worry, sources of worry that are out there right now. for
Yeah.
everyone, including yourself. Like, yeah.
Yeah.
And it's okay if obviously we don't know the answer. But.
Yeah, I don't know the answer. I mean, I can only take so much. So one of my coping mechanisms that I've never known if it's admirable or not, but certain members of my family call me the ostrich. I can't sometimes, like I will just go to ground. I will not read the news. I will not,
Yeah.
and I don't function like this daily, but I have a mode that I have to invoke every once in a while because I can't take it. There's a,
Yeah.
I don't remember which book it is, but it's a quote from a book in high school. I think it might be in the M. Forster book, but it says something like the heart can only take, like there is so much in the world that could be fixed in so many sort of dimensions of pain that the heart chooses its corner and suffers there, I think is the thing. So sometimes I think you have to choose your corner. Like you have to choose like the person who needs you today, or the thing you can do today, or to spend an hour outside and like just try to, manage through it. So sometimes I cannot take on the entire world, so you have to pick something.
Yeah. Yeah. Knowing limits, and it probably for any one of us that it fluctuates, that it changes depending on the situation and everything. But yeah, so much of the counseling process often comes back to a question of discerning around like, what can I control? What can't I control? I mean, it's very simple. It's very basic, but it's important. It's really important.
I think it's basic, but it's profound too.
Yeah.
I actually remember this is something about the control and the high achieving thing we talked about earlier, but I remember actually the first time I heard the serenity prayer, you control, make better what you can, you sort of tolerate or have serenity through the things you can and have the wisdom to know the difference.
Yep.
First time I heard that thing, I hated it. I was like, it's terrible. Why don't we do something about it? What am I going to sit around in serenity for? This is again, you then have some like life experience that shows you can't actually fix everything instantaneously. So I actually think that's profound, and I like have to cycle through that many times sometimes in the course of a month.
Yeah.
Is this in the we can do something about it pile, or is this in the like we have to find a way to endure this together pile?
Right. Yeah, and getting through the enduring waiting time.
Yeah.
On our own and together, I think is pretty crucial. I mean, in terms of also a learning process of how we do that well. Because again, more often than not, I guess my feeling is that we don't get a lot of training on how to do that well. Just like, just kind of waiting things out and just and knowing things are hard and pushing through and like you said at the beginning, like knowing we can make it. Yeah. Anything else? Because that goes right into just my last question, as well as the question of anything else you want to add before we end today. But again, thinking of our students who might be listening to this at some point, from your experience, Kristin, what feels important? Do you feel like students might need to hear a message around how to deal with the lives they're leading today, with the world we're in today?
Yeah.
Anything you want to say?
I mean, I think one thing to say is that, as you try to be, as I said, especially in the area I'm working with, where you're meeting people and trying to make good impressions and be your most sparkly self, that takes energy. It takes energy to meet new people. The good news is that right now, everyone is, because we're all carrying so much, I think we're much more human. Like the real us is closer to the surface for all of us. There's just like a little quarter inch, between like the outside and the real inside, because nobody can keep that up for, so long, so well. So I think people are ready to be more real in many ways. Even people you might have thought of as like intimidating, the Bowdoin alumni have just come out of the woodwork to be helpful. And when they say helpful, sure, they mean a job, but they also mean like a real conversation about whether it's about the industry or about your experience or whatever it is. So people are like more real now in a way, and more empathetic than I think they've been. I think it looks like you agree. I think I'm finding that for sure.
Completely agree.
Yeah.
Both in terms of seeing it starting to happen more and more, but also that it's just needed and where we're at.
Yeah, it feels just crazy to do anything else besides be as real as you can be. Because, like, yeah. And then I think give yourself breaks if you're doing things that are hard, like meeting new people, whether it's at school or, job stuff. Sometimes you just have to take a break from the thing, and that's okay. Like sometimes you just have to, sometimes a short break, you take a walk, you like talk to a friend. But the best thing you can do is kind of keep yourself a little centered as you're moving through this stuff, I think. And then I think the other thing is like, it's okay not to be okay sometimes. Like back to this, like we're more real than we've ever been. Like
Yeah.
when I ask somebody, how are you doing? Like, I like to hear the real answer. It's okay if the answer is like, not great.
Yeah.
Then at least you know where we are today. And I think more people can take that than we think. Like our friends can definitely take it.
Mm-hmm.
Or, even our acquaintances can often take it. It like leads to real conversation. I had a conversation, it was supposed to be about like a vendor for like a product I was looking at the other night. And it was a totally boring conversation for a while. We were both not that, I was like, I'm probably not gonna buy this. And she's like, you're probably not gonna buy this. Somewhere along the line, I was like, well, where are you time wise? What time is it where you are? You're in London? She's like, no, I'm actually in Tel Aviv. I was like, okay, great. Let's just talk about like, I would love to know, like, how are you in Tel Aviv? Like, how are things? Like, what's it like?
Huh.
And that was like just a profound little human moment in what was otherwise going to be a sales call.
Yeah.
And we became humans for the next like few minutes.
I appreciate that about you, Kristin. I feel like you bring that element, I think, pretty regularly, pretty naturally into spaces.
Thank you. Yeah, we all have to remember to slow down, and that's my biggest challenge always is like slow down. Actually.
Yeah, I think you attend to the human element well, and just like you're saying, just being able to acknowledge and just have a little bit of outlet for just like I'm actually not okay, and not even that we need to like figure that out or problem solve or because sometimes that's not what's called for or even possible. I mean, figuring it out. It can just be okay, like this is what's going on, and having some kind of shared experience over yeah and giving yourself a break. I was wondering if you might even just touch on say a little bit more, because I can hear I'm sure you can hear some students maybe reacting to that too, where it's like, of course, right, we all need breaks, and I think like pretty pervasively we like try to take a break, but even our break doesn't really feel like a break. We're like busy doing something else, or we make another appointment for something that's supposed to be like for our health or something. And how do we do that well? How do we give ourselves like a genuine break, do you think?
I'm not that good at this.
That's okay.
Working on it.
Together.
Yeah, no, I'm working on it. I remember like about a year ago, it was like, it's just September, and September's always busy. Now I was supposed to be on the way to a chiropractor, because if I sit too wrong in the wrong way for too long, and it happens almost at the beginning of the school year every year, like it's like a 45-minute drive, and I got in the car and I was like, I'm not going to make it. Like, there's no way, no matter how fast I go. And it's because I took like 2 more things at the end of the day that I shouldn't have taken, because I'm making this only one investment in my actual like health and functioning. I was like, I got really mad at myself. I pulled over, I called them, I told them I wasn't coming, and I like had a little talk with myself.
I've had those moments. I was
like, why is the one thing you're supposed to be doing the only thing you didn't manage to do today? And who, like, what kind of priorities are those? So I don't know. I mean, I think it is always easier to give this advice than to take it. Is what I find. But it is because we all know it's important. It's back to the friend thing. It's like, well, what do you tell your friend? And you're like, right. For God's sake, give yourself a little bit of a break and like go for a walk. And you're like,
friend, no, get those few things done first. You gotta get.
You wouldn't be like, push yourself to the edge, push yourself to your break. You wouldn't do it. So, but we do it to ourselves all the dang time, and I don't really know. I do think it's kind of. It is an interesting balance, because I do honestly think I read a book once about, I think it was just called Work, or the Value of Work or something. And I really do believe that especially if you do something, you're lucky to do something you like, or it makes you feel achievement or accomplishment, then it is healthy, I think, to do stuff that is accomplishment and achieving. But like, I think we all know when we hit that moment, and it's like when you go past that moment that you So I don't know. All I know is I'm a little better at recognizing it. And so at least one thing I like the analogy of is the oxygen mask. So when you're on a plane and something happens, you're supposed to put on your own oxygen mask first.
Yeah.
And it's totally counterintuitive because you're like, what if I was with a small person or an old person or like them first, right? And they're like, no, 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 you cannot function unless you have oxygen. And so sometimes I just try to ask other people, sometimes that is a revelation too. When you ask other people this and you're like, oh, do I have my own oxygen mask on? Is this my own? And sometimes you're like, this is an oxygen mask moment. Like you just need to do whatever you need for yourself. Because it's actually important and it helps you help other people.
That's right.
So I think that is part of it. And now I notice some of the behaviors. I've seen some of them in the past week, actually. I started to talk too fast. I started to walk too fast. I try to do too many things in like a short period of time. And I'm like, it's just like this dervish kind of thing and energy. And I don't think it's actually helpful to other people, but I now like see it more.
Exactly.
I don't know.
I think you are saying it, Kristin. I mean, I think that's how we figure it out, or that's a portion of it. And it's catching ourselves in these moments and building the awareness, like, oh, I'm doing it. I'm like, this is it. I'm in that moment.
Yeah.
I need to change. Like, I need to start shifting this because, like, this is not how I want to. When I start to see myself, like, this is not how I want to be.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think it's catching yourself, recognizing it. You've seen the pattern. It's like giving yourself a reason. It's sad if the reason has to be, I mean, maybe the reason should just be because I need it. But if it helps you to be like, because I need it, so then I can help other people, great, like whatever works for you. Yeah. And I think it's like finding a thing that actually makes you feel more centered, like knowing what some of those things are and like doing one.
Yeah. Yeah. I have to say too, before I forget, Kristin, I'm just realizing as we're talking that you're no surprise, like a great, I think, source of resources, as you're naming all different kinds of books and other kinds of resources. So yeah, I definitely want to tap on you to build our resource list.
Yeah, we can make a list.
You know, I think we need to get this kind of information out to students and anyone, I feel like, who could benefit from.
Yeah. Yeah, it's not easy. I think that's what's so interesting when you were asking, like, how do you do this? And I was like, I don't know. It's not easy.
It's not. It's like we're piecing these things together over our lifetime.
Yeah, but I think that's back to the, like, what is mental health? Like, it's a practice, right? And it's not like a broken moment or like a bad something happened. It's like a practice. So
you're right. Yeah. I so appreciate this. I can't thank you enough. I appreciate you, Kristin, and what you do for us and who you are.
Me too. Thank you. The same.
Thank you.